is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to The World Today, live from CGTN in London. I'm Jamie Owen. The headlines: dozens of people feared killed in bomb blast near a school in Afghanistan. Most of those hurt are schoolgirls. Our other headlines: two of the world's huge economic heavyweights, the EU and India, revive trade talks to improve economic relations. Scotland could be on the brink of a majority for pro-independence parties, with profound consequences for the future of the UK. And clashes between Israeli police and Palestinians amid rising tension over evictions. Well, we start with that developing story in Kabul. Dozens of people are reported to have been killed after a series of explosions outside a school in the Afghan capital. Hospitals in Kabul say a number of the dead are young students, while scores of people have also been wounded. Let's talk to our correspondent Ali Latifi in Kabul. Ali, what's the latest you have for us?
So basically what happened was the attack took place about 2 hours before the fast-breaking iftar meal in Kabul. So this is a time when people would be rushing to get home, when they would be out on the street trying to get, last-minute goods for the fast breaking. And then obviously people who are in school or in study centers would be heading back home, to complete their fast. And so this is how we ended up with so many students, with so many young girls being the victims of this kind of an attack. And as we've seen before, this is an attack that is purposely targeting the Hazara ethnic minority in Afghanistan, who make up the majority of Afghanistan's Shia population as well. And they have come under attack repeatedly by the so-called Islamic State. Now, so far, they haven't come right out and accepted responsibility for it, but the Taliban have come out and condemned the attack, saying it's barbaric and that, you should not be targeting students. So it raises more fears of the fact that, there are so many armed groups in Afghanistan and so many people targeting civilians in this country.
Ali, there's been a resurgence of violence in Afghanistan. What's behind these recent attacks?
So, obviously, we're seeing that the peace talks are being stalled. We're also seeing that these so-called Islamic State groups, they've also reformed. They've gotten much stronger than they were than in recent years, because in 2017 and 2018, the government was saying that we had eradicated the so-called Islamic State forces. But what we've seen is that over the last 2-3 years, they've actually been able to stage major attacks on, provincial capitals in Afghanistan. So we're talking about the city of Kabul, the national capital, and we're talking about the city of Jalalabad, the capital of Nangarhar province, just east of Kabul. And, we are getting reports that these so-called Islamic State forces, whereas their bases used to be in the districts of Nangarhar province, now they're moving into the city, into the capital, into Jalalabad, and also, ahead of attacks coming into Kabul and infiltrating here as well. So again, what we're seeing is that there's just so many armed groups, each with their own motives in this country.
Ali Latifi in Afghanistan, thank you very much. The European Union and India have agreed to revive trade talks which have been frozen since 2013. The Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, joined EU leaders for a virtual summit aimed at closer cooperation between New Delhi and Brussels. The EU chief, Ursula von der Leyen, called it a landmark moment. Let's talk to our correspondent, Rahul Pathak, who's been following developments from Madrid. Rahul, why is this happening now?
Hello there, Jamie. Well, I think there's more of a political will for an agreement to happen now. You may remember that the two sides actually began trade talks back in 2007. They lasted 5 years until 2013, and then it broke up without any agreement. The main stumbling blocks being India's unwillingness to lift tariffs on certain EU products like cars and wine, whilst the EU were reluctant to allow Indian workers to work within the European Union. The pandemic and the resulting change in the geopolitical landscape has forced both sides, I think, to look past those differences and acknowledge the undoubted benefits of stronger Indo-EU ties. Here's my report. the EU and India announced on Saturday that they will relaunch trade talks that were originally suspended back in 2013. EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen underlined the importance of increasing strategic relations on trade, digital, climate change and multilateralism with India, the European Union's 10th largest trading partner. Now, the talks were originally meant to be face-to-face, but the recent surge in COVID-related deaths in India has forced the summit in Porto to be changed to a virtual meeting between the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the 27 leaders of the EU bloc.
Today we agreed to launch negotiations on mutually reinforcing agreements on trade, on investment protection and on geographical indications. This is an important first step.
The move comes as the UK intends to begin its own post-Brexit trade talks with India in the autumn. The EU is hopeful it can steal a march on Britain and become the first bloc to sign a comprehensive free trade agreement with India. A study last year by the European Parliament had estimated, prior to Britain's departure from the EU, that the benefits of a trade agreement between Brussels and New Delhi could top $10 billion. In addition to talks on trade, there is renewed enthusiasm to tackle climate change, explore energy storage technology and cooperate on global infrastructure projects. The EU is the second largest destination for Indian exports after the United States, so the momentum is there from both sides to make progress this time around. Now, it's not just about having stronger ties economically, it's about having closer ties politically. For a long time, the EU has wanted to have more of a presence in the Indo-Pacific region, have a more naval presence down there, and closer relations with India will allow them to do that. And of course, as I mentioned there, we have global warming, the fight against global warming. Both the EU and India, two of the biggest producers of greenhouse global gases. If they can come to some kind of joint agreement, that will be hugely significant in the ongoing battle against global warming. Jamie.
Rahul Pathak in Madrid, thank you very much. Meanwhile, the EU says it's ready to discuss waiving patent rights to COVID vaccines as soon as the United States puts a concrete proposal on the table. Member states have been discussing the issue at a summit in Porto. This comes after US President Joe Biden announced support for the idea, provided it was done through the World Trade Organization. But French President Emmanuel Macron says the priority should be distribution of vaccines and lifting of export curbs.
Today, there is not a factory in the world that cannot produce doses for poor countries because of patents. The priority today is not patents. That's not true. We would be lying to ourselves. It's production. What is blocking production today? Of what we have produced, we have let 50% be exported. In the United States and Great Britain, 100% of what they produce was consumed by their domestic market.
The votes are still being counted in some parts of the UK after one of the biggest tests of public opinion in Europe since the pandemic. Tens of millions of people in England, Scotland and Wales have been voting for national, regional and local government. And as we come on air, we are still waiting to learn if the Scottish National Party might win a working majority in the Scottish Parliament. If that were the case, there are implications for Scotland's independence and the future of the UK. Let's talk to our correspondent, Naweed Jabarkul, who's been following the story for us. Scotland's result very close. What's the latest from the Scottish parliamentary election?
Refreshing as we're talking, Jamie. The latest results is out of 129 seats in the Scottish Parliament, 71 have been declared. 59 of those have gone to the SNP. What they need is 65 seats, in the, so just over half, to form a working majority. And one of the UK's leading polling experts, Sir John Curtis, says that they may fall just short of that. He predicts it will be 63. Now, what that means is that they won't be able to push ahead with Nicola Sturgeon's demands for a second independence referendum on their own, but it doesn't mean that there won't be a majority in the Parliament for Scotland's independence. What they will need is to form a coalition with another party. At the moment, that appears to be the Green Party. They're on 0 seats as it stands, but with about 55 seats still left to declare, that's definitely going to change. The Conservative Party, the party of Boris Johnson, they're set to win some seats, as is Labour, which has lost a lot of support, a lot of ground in Scotland in recent times. But the expectation is that the Greens and the SNP may form an alliance. If they do, it's going to cause a big political headache for Boris Johnson. Johnson, because they've already said that both of them will back the idea of a second independence referendum, but no guarantee that that's something that will be pushed ahead, especially with the country focusing on COVID-19.
Well, the results obviously still coming in, and still many races still to declare. But at the other end of the UK, the race for Mayor of London is particularly interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, an interesting one. This was one area where Labour were expecting to do very well. Sadiq Khan, the incumbent mayor, took over from Boris Johnson, in fact. He was expected to win comfortably. That wasn't the case, although things seem to have turned in his favour in the last few hours. The latest votes we've had in that have been declared, about 3/4 of votes have been counted. Sadiq Khan on 40%, Sean Bailey, his Conservative Party rival, falling back 1% on 35%. But what this does indicate is a problem that Labour faces across the wider country. What they're seeing is, traditionally, it was the working class heartlands in the north of England, in Scotland, that Labour were particularly strong in. Boris Johnson has flipped that on its head. It's now the Conservative Party doing well in those parts of the country, and ironically the Labour Party, seen as which formed as a working class party, doing well in areas which voted to remain in the European Union in that all-important Brexit referendum in 2016, and that usually corresponds to cosmopolitan areas like London. So it looks like they're going to hold on to London. They have held on to Manchester, one of the UK's other big cities in the north of England, but certainly a lot of trouble ahead for the Labour Party and where it goes from here after a devastating loss nationwide.
You've covered elections for years. I mean, what is your big takeaway? What should we all take away from the election of this year in the UK?
I think the first thing to watch out for is what happens in Scotland, because if Nicola Sturgeon does manage to form a majority in that in the Scottish Parliament, she's made it abundantly clear that she's going to come knocking on Westminster's door for a second referendum. She can't have that unless the UK Parliament in Westminster gives her approval. They're not going to do that. Boris Johnson today said that would be irresponsible and reckless. They do have the options of going down the legal route, so this could be something protracted. A lot of people in this country, when you talk to them, say they were sick and tired of Brexit. They may be dealing with a new term called Skexit. But the other thing is, these elections may not have the power of a general election, the global attention of a general election, but what they do is offer a glimpse into public opinion on how the major parties are forming. And at the moment, it's a big thumbs up for Boris Johnson.
Skexit. Naweed Jabarkul, thank you very much. Hundreds of protesters have gathered in Mexico's capital demanding justice for the 25 people killed when a metro line collapsed. The demonstrators met at the side of the accident when they paid tribute to the victims in a candlelit vigil. The accident happened on one of the newest parts of the city's metro system, which had been plagued by problems since it opened in 2012. Protesters have taken to the streets in Brazil's Rio De Janeiro to demand justice for the victims of the city's deadliest police raid in more than a decade. At least 25 people, including a police officer, were killed in Thursday's shootout. The police say they launched the operation after receiving reports that drug traffickers were recruiting children for their gang. People in the Russian city of Rezev have been treated to a display by 1,000 drones to commemorate Russia's part in defeating the Nazis at the end of the Second World War. The drones depicted images related to the war ahead of Russia's Victory Day. The celebrations were disrupted by the pandemic last year. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead here on The World Today. The Chinese talent show that's got the country in a froth over spilt milk.
More than 100,000 people in Italy have now died from COVID-19.
The vaccination programme offers some hope for the future, but intensive care units are near capacity.
The Spanish government is hoping to vaccinate over 1 million people by next month.
Living in Germany are struggling with their mental health.
Hungary is supplementing the EU's vaccine rollout, buying doses from Russia and China to speed up the process.
4 million people have tested positive in France.
After a grim winter, the promise of a spring bloom that could mean freedom for millions.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our headlines. Dozens of people are feared to have been killed in bomb blasts near a school in Afghanistan. Most of those hurt are schoolgirls. Our other headlines: economic heavyweights India and the EU revive trade talks to improve relations. And as we've been reporting, Scotland could be on the brink of a majority for pro-independence parties, with profound consequences for the future of the UK. Several hundred people have been injured in clashes between Israeli forces and Palestinians in East Jerusalem. Tensions have been escalating over the potential eviction of Palestinians from land claimed by Jewish settlers. Let's talk to our correspondent Stephanie Freed in Jerusalem. Stephanie, what's behind this latest violence?
Well, it's certainly, it started at the beginning of Ramadan, and it's, as you noted, it's over settlement of Palestinian homes, eviction of Palestinians, a show of force at the beginning of Ramadan by Israel's police at the entrance to Islam's third holiest site, Al-Aqsa Mosque. And let me just give you a little background of where I am right now. We didn't quite make it to Jerusalem because of all the tension that's been going on and the scenes that you're seeing now. People tonight, Muslims from all over inside of Israel, Arab citizens of Israel, they were busing, they were on their way to pray at Al-Aqsa Mosque. They were stopped and they were told they couldn't go in. Israel security forces, they're concerned that there will be more widespread protest with busloads of people coming in. So they essentially were stopped. The people you see behind me, the buses you see behind me, they were told, sorry, you can't go to prayer tonight. And it's the holiest night of prayer, at least one of the holiest nights in Islam. So what has happened, and I can't turn the camera around to show you because there's a checkpoint in front of us and it's a security issue. Hundreds and hundreds of people got off these buses and they're going to walk 30-some kilometers to get to Al-Aqsa Mosque. And that's happening along the main highways to get into Jerusalem. Jerusalem's basically shut down to these buses, and so intense traffic scenes as well as busloads of people who are unloading and they're walking toward Al-Aqsa Mosque. Israel security forces, there was a meeting, there was a consultation between the top brass today talking about elevating the levels of security. But it's hard to imagine that people being angry, they've been fasting all day, they were turned back, they're getting off buses, walking up to Jerusalem, that may not have a positive outcome.
Stephanie Freed, thank you very much for that. India has recorded its highest ever single-day coronavirus death toll, with almost 4,200 fatalities in the last 24 hours. States are imposing stricter lockdowns as the country battles a devastating second wave. Officials say the healthcare system is on the brink of collapse, with patients dying due to lack of oxygen or access to hospital beds. It sparked public anger over Prime Minister Narendra Modi's handling of the pandemic. Nepal is battling a new wave of coronavirus too, with the death toll there rising. Officials in Kathmandu are making space for funeral pyres on the riverbank. Infections have spilled across the Indian border into Nepal. Authorities are battling a shortage of hospital beds, oxygen and other medical supplies. The country says it's expecting oxygen cylinders from China in the next few days. New freedoms for fully vaccinated Germans take effect from midnight on Sunday. They can now meet as many people as they want and are exempt from curfews. But they'll still have to wear face masks and observe social distancing. Almost 9% of Germans are fully vaccinated, with about a third waiting for their second shot. Greeks have taken to the Mediterranean for the first time after lockdown, after the government there reopened private beaches. Museums are set to reopen next Friday, a day before the country opens its borders to international tourism. Last month, Greece lifted quarantine for vaccinated or tested travellers from the European Union, the UK and the United States. When COVID-19 first hit the UK, the government said it would throw a protective ring around care homes. Instead, more than 30,000 people in homes died from the virus. The government then introduced strict rules about visiting relatives in care homes. But this week, that's all changed. Nicole Johnston reports.
Kathy Barham waited months for this reunion with her 91-year-old mother, Mavis Addison, who lives in a care home and suffers from dementia. But she longs to take her into the garden, and until this week wasn't allowed to unless her mother quarantined for 2 weeks afterwards.
We'll be able to take her for a walk from outside the care home because it's limited to just myself and my brother. We won't be able to go very far, but just to be able to walk her down the road is fantastic.
But now the government has changed its previous guidelines that required people in care homes to isolate after being outside, giving people hope.
I like to get out and I like to be with my friends and that, you know. Visiting family is brilliant. Yes, that's superb. That's probably a good one.
For some care homes, balancing the safety and health of its residents with their desire to see their family has been an, at times, impossible balance.
A lot of the residents have deteriorated mentally over the year from being kept indoors, so I think this will be a great opportunity to, especially with the weather improving now as well, for residents to be able to get fresh air, to see their loved ones outside the care home environment.
These are small steps for families who've been fighting to see their loved ones throughout the pandemic.
You may be stopping them from getting COVID, but you're making their dementia worse, you're making them, you know, that you'd see them crying. We've all seen the films, haven't we? People absolutely devastated and people believing that their family had forgotten about them and didn't care. And it's just cruel beyond belief.
The rules say Kathy is now allowed to hold her mum's hand, but she still can't hug her. Nicole Johnston, CGTN, London.
Now, Saturday was supposed to be the finale of one of China's most popular online talent shows, but Youth With You has been suspended following controversy over a voting promotion which critics say is causing food waste. Zhao Winjie reports.
The show has been halted, together with the applause, the hoorays and the dreams. Saturday night was supposed to be a brand new start for the careers of some lucky contestants, but now there's nothing. The trigger was a video showing large amounts of bottled milk being poured down drains. The milk was bought by viewers who wanted to vote numerous times for their favorite contestant. To vote, they were required to buy a bottle of Mengniu milk, a major sponsor of the show, and scan a QR code on the inside of the cap. But the promotion went terribly wrong. Run by video platform iQIYI, online votes are the decisive favor. So it turns into a competition not just among contestants, but also their fans. So much so that special fan clubs were formed to help their favorites. These fan clubs even tried to raise money to buy milk, knowing they couldn't drink it all. Some say they donated their surplus to orphanages or elderly homes, others just poured it into sewers. Criticism is not just targeted at the fans, but also the organizers of the show.
In talent shows like this, fans need to spend plenty of money and energy to build the connections between them and their favourite contestants. This is just one case of marketing, but ideologically it's hard to avoid deviations from the mainstream values. As long as the advertisers associate the purchase of products with votes for the contestants, bulk buying is a must. For individual consumers, it inevitably leads to waste.
In a previous season of Youth with You, the fan clubs of the 9 eventual winners are said to have spent 48 million yuan on products of Mengniu.
Fan culture or fan economy is pushed by such talent shows. The producing platforms and sponsors are communities of shared interests. The voting mechanism requires the fans to spend money, which is the main source of profits. Some of the profits go to the platform, some go to the sponsors.
The scandal immediately drew fire from the authorities. On Tuesday, Beijing's Radio and Television Bureau ordered iQIYI to suspend the show. The video platform accepted the criticism, apologized for a breakdown in its social responsibility, and said it would try to rectify the matter. Mengniu also apologized. With the show now suspended, iQIYI has promised to compensate those who voted. But no one knows how the curtain is going to fall this time. Zhao Yunjie, CGTN.
CGTN.com has all the week's top stories, including the latest China space launch, a battle to save an ancient pagoda, TikTok announcing its new boss, a new Chinese box office record, the rescue of more than 700 missing and abducted children, and domestic tourism surging. And the headlines again. Dozens of people are feared killed in bomb blasts near a school in Afghanistan. Most of those hurt are schoolgirls. And that's it for The World Today. Thank you for watching. We're on smart TV apps such as Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, on YouTube and Dailymotion, as well as CGTN.com and on the CGTN app. Coming up next on CGTN, Stephen Cole with the agenda. But from me, goodbye.